This is PBS.
About Your House with Bob Yap was partially underwritten by the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
In past places and future spaces, from main streets to back roads, we're helping Americans bring preservation home. The National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Well, welcome to today's program, and it's about saving our architectural heritage. Kind of close to my heart because the theme in my life has been preservation doesn't cost, it pays, and it's something I also want to bring home to you. And we're going to do this in two parts. How did all this great architecture get torn down in the first place, even today? And then what are all the great solutions from coast to coast, from individuals to groups? And I want to start off in a landfill because, believe it or not, as much as 40% of our landfills are filled with construction and demolition debris. Now here we've got new construction debris. It's all been pushed out this way. Here's a hunk of demolition, and look at this crushed up demolition stuff over here, an old piano. I tell you, it's kind of sad, really, but that's where it all ends up when it gets torn down. Okay, so how do we lose all this great historic architecture? Well, parking lots are really the place to start, because I want you to consider something. 250 million people approximately live in America, and they own 136 million cars. Can you believe it? That's an awful lot of automobiles. Now, they tore down this gorgeous historic building that could have been restored into lofts, office space, apartments, to put in an asphalt parking lot that actually has about half full all the time. It's pretty pathetic, if you ask me. There's a great book out there called Asphalt Nation. It's by Jane Holtz, and she has some good statistics in it. She's done a lot of research. One of them is that 30 to 40% of all urban areas are given over to automobiles. That's a lot. And in Houston, Texas, for every one car, there are 30 parking spaces. Unbelievable, isn't it? And it's all done so that people can have a place to park, like when they go to gamble on the casino on the Mississippi River. Can you believe it? Well, it looks to me like they're topping off a tree against your ordinances out here in Pasadena.
I'm really concerned, and I look at the other trees around the neighborhood that they've recently pruned, and it's just been a disaster with what damage they're wreaking upon this neighborhood.
Well, let me introduce you to Claire Bogard. She's the former director of Pasadena Heritage, which is a historic preservation group here in Pasadena. And, well, a community activist, somebody that's involved and cares about what's going on around. Right?
Right.
Okay. The reason that we're here, we're talking about parking lots and how cars affect America and our architectural heritage. What's going on here? Now, all these houses in the background that we see, the boarded up one and the empty one here, they're all owned by who?
They're all owned by Caltrans, the California Department of Transportation. Caltrans has owned them for 20, 30, 40 years. Since the early days of deciding to build a freeway through this neighborhood.
What's the freeway's name?
The freeway is called the 710 or the Long Beach Freeway.
Okay, so they bought up all these houses many, many years ago, and essentially, as far as I can tell, and I've been in a lot of neighborhoods around the country, they're really kind of slumlords.
I think that's the way to classify it, and it's really a tragedy for this neighborhood. This was the birthplace of Pasadena, and these homes are some of our best resources.
It's really a sad thing.
And originally they all had families in them. 23 years ago when we moved into this neighborhood, there were families in all of these Caltrans owned homes. Whereas now a good percentage of them are vacant and subject to continual vandalism, architectural stripping. It's just a real tragedy.
Well, because, you know, the imminence of the freeway coming through, nobody wants to do anything. Caltrans obviously not doing anything with them, except topping off trees they shouldn't be topping off. The freeway is like this looming thing.
Well, it's looming, and then again, it's not looming. It's been looming for 40 years. And at this point, there has been a decision at the federal government to move forward with it, but now the federal government is going to be facing a lawsuit, And I think those of us who remain close to this issue feel that somewhere along the line we hope that wiser minds are going to prevail and people are going to realize that this freeway is not needed, it's too expensive, we shouldn't be building freeways anymore in Los Angeles area, and that we should be relying upon public transportation and mass transit.
Well, now there's the point. So now the solution to the problem, if you don't put the freeway through, is public transportation, really,
right,
isn't it?
Right, and I think most people who are at least thinking people realize that we have to get Los Angeles people out of their cars and into mass transit and public transportation. There is a proposal, a serious proposal for a Blue Line, which is a light rail system, which is actually half constructed. But it was stopped midway because of mismanagement of funds in Los Angeles at the Metropolitan Transit Authority. So our hope is that that will get back on track, no pun intended, and instead that we will see the Blue Line constructed and that this freeway will ultimately be declared as an obsolete proposal.
We wish you a lot of luck in your
you.
endeavor. It won't be a luck, it'll be hard work.
It will be hard work.
It always is.
It's been hard work, but we'll continue to persevere.
Come out to Des Moines, Iowa with me, and we're going to take a look at a freeway that was put in a long time ago and see what the effect of that has been. You know, I love Pasadena. Well, this is the McVicker Freeway. They call it I-235. It runs through the heart of my hometown, Des Moines, Iowa. And somebody with a lot of brains back in the late 1950s decided that all these people that were abandoning the heart of the city and going out to the suburbs, they needed to be able to get into town. Instead of 20 minutes, they needed to be able to get into downtown in 15. So what did they do? They put this freeway through. It took out hundreds of historic homes, and it took a community that was working very hard to become integrated and permanently segregated. That side of the freeway on the north side, houses became abandoned, the slumlords moved in and took over. And on the south side of the freeway, economic development boomed. It's a very sad statement of affairs, and all for the sake of 5 or 10 minutes. Isn't that enough to make you just want to throw up? The most devastating thing that's happened to central city neighborhoods over the years all across America are people moving out to the suburbs. Now, they move out to the burbs, they're not paying taxes in town, but they still come back into the heart of the city and they use all the services. That's a problem. Now, it all started with streetcars. People were able to move out to the edge of town and build their little burbs. And then what happened, of course, is that automobiles came and people moved out in droves. I'm talking big time. They kept moving out. So after all this happens and the slumlords move in, they suck the properties dry. Urban renewal came in the 50s and 60s and tore down entire neighborhoods. It was really bad. And then they started packing in all this public housing into one neighborhood or one central city area. Not a good thing. And of course, after that, everybody's gone, the houses are abandoned, the urban miners come in, they take all the architectural artifacts. Listen, the cost to society is huge here. It just has to stop. So what I want to know, though, is where did all these people move? Where are the burbs? When people move out of the heart of the city and out to the burbs, this is how it all starts. This used to be a beautiful cornfield and actually some of the most valuable farmland in the whole world, actually. It's in Iowa, and it is the best. Now, what happens? They come out here, they build these houses. The most redeeming quality of the house and the design seems to be a 3-car garage. They're all covered in plastic, which of course is petroleum, and it's not a renewable resource. The economics of driving back and forth into town with the commute uses gas as well. You've got all kinds of issues with urban sprawl. That's what we call it. Now, they don't want commercial in these little neighborhoods, so they build them out on these big strips and they lay waste more farmland. But who's planning this stuff? Nobody's planning it. The developers are, but there's really no plan. It's future slum. In 50 years, this stuff will look terrible because the construction techniques are absolutely abysmal. So this all sounds pretty depressing, but let me ask you this. You think something's going on positive? You better believe it. Let's go take a look. Well, to reverse the devastation of urban renewal all across the country, an interesting thing happened. In the 60s and 70s, an interesting group of people, well, I like to call them urban pioneers, decided to come back into these central city historic neighborhoods and reclaim them. And one of my neighbors and friends right here is Diane Astrike.
Hi, Bob.
And she came down to this neighborhood, the Broadway Historic area in Rock Island, Illinois, gosh, years ago, didn't you?
Years ago, 34.
Let's sit down.
Okay.
I love these porches. This is a good one, too.
It's one of the high points of old houses.
I know. We sit out on our porch all the time. Talk to me a little bit about how this all got started down here. Now, Broadway, I know because I'm involved too. We have a great neighborhood association.
Right.
But how did that all start?
It really started in the early 80s, and a few people got together who liked these old houses, and said, let's have a Rock Island Preservation Society.
But that was citywide.
That was absolutely citywide.
Right.
But that was to raise the consciousness of people, because you can't save the old buildings if people don't appreciate what they have.
Right.
So we found, though, that many of our activities were focused in what later became known as the Broadway area, and decided we really needed a spin-off organization that could focus strictly on Broadway and let the Preservation Society, which I'm still active in, stay citywide, because there's a lot of preservation to do throughout the city.
People have told me, and I still hear this sometimes, that we've overcome this pretty much because the neighborhood, people want to live down here now. It's below the hill. Now, there are these people that live up on the hill. We, of course, think that living below the hill is the place to live. But that was something that we had to overcome a little bit in the beginning.
And in fact, you use the term urban pioneer, and some people think you go into a devastated neighborhood, and this never was. This was always a decent neighborhood, lots of old people.
Good houses in it.
Good houses, and mostly good neighbors.
This is just like the greatest neighborhood that I've ever lived in. Well, Diane's been here a long time, and I want to take you out to Pasadena, California, and show you some neighbors that have been in a neighborhood a long time out there as well, and talk a little bit about how they turn theirs around. You know, I love what's going on there. Well, all across America, one of the things that you're going to find from historic area to historic area is that the houses change, the styles, the age, maybe the streetscapes. But one thing for sure is a lot of the issues seem to be really close to being the same. Now, we're in bungalow heaven in Pasadena, California, and this is a great bungalow to start off. We like to have porch parties and stuff like that. In fact, why don't you come up on the porch and I'll introduce you to a couple of neighbors, and we'll talk about how this neighborhood is getting turned around. I really do love your house, Jim. It's gorgeous. This is Jim Galloway, and this is Cindy Rice, and they're neighbors here in Bungalow Heaven. You know, Jim, how long have you lived in the neighborhood?
21 years, Bob.
21 years. How about you, Cindy?
15 years this month.
So you guys have been around here for a while. Now, when you first moved here, Jim, what was going on? Was it a little rougher than what it is now? Were people appreciating the architecture as much? What was going on?
No, I would say at that point it was really just a small community of homes that were in various stages of disrepair. There was no local central area in the neighborhood. It didn't seem to me that it was a cohesive neighborhood, although it was beautiful.
You might know your neighbor next door, but that may be about it.
But that was about it.
Well, what about crime? Was crime a little higher back then?
I don't think so. I don't recall that it was any higher at that time.
Crime rate's not too bad in this neighborhood, Cindy, is it?
No, not bad at all.
That's great. Now, you moved here not quite as long ago as Jim. What was your experience moving in here? There's a little history behind that, isn't there?
Well, when we moved in, most of our neighbors were in the process of fixing up their homes. So I think it was a little bit different than when Jim moved in. It was a little bit later.
When did Bungalow Heaven become a neighborhood group in a sense? At what point? Either one of you.
They had converted a reservoir down here into a park area.
Now, this is the park that everybody goes down and uses, and there's moms with baby carriages, and it really is a beautiful park.
Yes, and it gets a lot of use, a lot of people. But beginning with that park and a couple of people that moved into the neighborhood who had experiences in this kind of a restoration area, they became involved in soliciting people that lived in the neighborhood to turn this into a landmark district.
Right. Well, the neighborhood just looks fabulous. All the houses are being renovated. Everybody seems to care. You guys are doing a great job. Jim, Cindy, thanks a lot. Let's go out to Pittsburgh and take a look at another neighborhood where they're trying to turn things around as well. The Allegheny West Historic District is in Pittsburgh, and I'm with Ann Eubanks, and this is Bill Swazik. And there are a couple of urban pioneers out here. And Bill, now you've lived here for quite a while. What was going on when you moved here and how long ago?
Well, I moved here in '76 with my wife Eileen. And when we moved here, the neighborhood was, as you see it in regards to the fact that all the housing stock was here, except it was 25%, 30% boarded up, vacant, vandalized. I mean, the neighborhood really had hit a low spot.
A lot of social service group homes, things like that.
We were we were inundated with social services. The people that were living in the neighborhood were living pretty densely populated. There were 8, 10, 12 people living in each one of these homes.
So Mary Ann, from your perspective, you moved in a little bit later than that.
89.
89. What were some of the things that you were attracted to here?
The concept of neighborhood. We had heard about Allegheny West. We said, hey, can we get a house over there? And we were lucky enough to get this one. This one only had 5 apartments in when we moved in and turned it back into single family.
So the neighborhood group had been doing some effective marketing?
Absolutely. They had been, for a long time, tours, lots of things that you could find. Good place to come and visit. And once you visited, it was real hard to leave.
And Bill, marketing has been, from your perspective, important too?
I think marketing has really been important in getting the message across that the neighborhood is a wonderful place, that we had a lot to offer. You know, we've done it in multiple ways. We have a Christmas house tour. We have a garden tour in the summertime. We really extend ourselves to the community so that they can get a feeling for what it's like to live in a Victorian neighborhood.
Well, marketing is a key in a lot of these neighborhoods, so remember that. If you live in a historic neighborhood, get to the marketing to make it turn around. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, good to see you.
One of the issues that urban pioneers as neighborhood groups have to deal with on a regular basis are individual really troubled properties, like the Anastasia Murphy house. Now, it was built in 1878 by Anastasia Murphy, really historic. It was a double house, and it was going to get torn down. So we came in as the show about your house, and we bought the house, but we can't use it this season because we're doing another house. And that creates an issue because the roof's in bad shape, the brick's falling down, the porch is sagging, the stairs are bad, windows are broken. It's not a pretty sight. So what's the answer? Well, it's sitting on the edge of a beautifully restored neighborhood called the Broadway Historic District. It's in Rock Island, Illinois. And things that you can do are like what Phil's doing right here, is he's just getting the doors going so that people can't get in. That's a big important issue. But there's a way to make this house not have negative images. In fact, there are a lot of solutions to taking care of houses like this other than tearing them down. Let's take a look. Well, one of the solutions to this problem is what we call mothballing. Now, that's where you take a house, you stabilize the roof, and you make it look good on the outside just to keep it for later renovation. You see, you take a Central City historic neighborhood, everybody's moving in, the neighborhood's turning around. Well, the neighborhood next to it might not be in as good a shape, but down the road, it could turn. But if you tear down all the houses, they're gone forever. And in fact, it actually costs less money to mothball a house than it does to tear one down. So start thinking in that way and you'll be in really good shape. Now, our solution, since the house was brick, we couldn't paint it. We're going to stabilize the roof. We're going to put painted plywood panels in. The students at Rock Island High School in Rock Island, Illinois are doing, like Emily right here, and she's doing this whole living room scene with plants and everything like that. It really is a fun thing. People are going to be smiling when they drive by this house now. Hey, Jesse, come here for a second. This is Jesse Adams. He's the art teacher. Thanks for letting us do this with your students. How'd you come up with the students?
First of all, the help of the other art teachers in the department. We asked for students who could handle their work and also something extra, and this was...
Because it's extra time that these kids have put into this.
It is, but they are able to do it.
And they've done a great job. They submitted designs to you beforehand, and now they're going to it.
Exactly.
They've done a great job.
Exactly.
Let's talk to a little bit and see what we got going on. All right, tell us what your name is.
Chad.
Chad. All right, Chad. Living room scene, big like chair, wingback chair and everything. That's great. That looks nice. And then over here, this character here. What's your name?
Seth Chris.
This is Seth. Seth, this is neat. Up in the gable of the house that we were looking at before are triangular windows. So you came up with...
stained glass windows.
Yeah.
Because just the shape of them, it's really weird.
Yeah, but stained glass, appropriate old house. It was a great idea. Now over here is another one. This is Stephanie Lapel, and she is actually an intern on our show in the summertime and a senior at Rock Island High. Sophomore, all right. This is nice though, lots of color. And then you have, you know, you have to have a fish and a vase and a lava lamp. Got to have that. Retro City. I love it. Well, you've all been cooped up in this art room, putting in all this extra time working on this stuff. You want to come along and go see us put them up so you can see what your great creations will look like? Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's go. You know what? It's looking great. It's all about positive visual images. Now, in your community, you can take the things that have created negative images over the years that people feel bad about and give them this positive visual imagery. It's great stuff. Billy, what do you think?
It doesn't look too bad, Bob.
Well, I think it looks pretty good, don't you?
Yeah.
But you're not very enthusiastic, Bill.
Because
you got to put them all.
That's right. That's
what do you
right.
guys think? You like your work? Yeah! It's great. You got to love it. Well, out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they're doing some mothballing out there to create positive visual images. It's a little different, but I think you'll enjoy it. So this is what your project, this section of the building, looked like before you got started?
Yeah.
It's a mess. Boarded up how many years?
Vacant vandalized about 15, 20 years.
Wow. This is Mark Fatlaw, and he's a neighborhood activist. This is called the Denny Rowe Project in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And what they did is they took an abandoned building that was in really bad shape, and they created a visual impact.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how the project went.
Sure. The properties have been vacant. The private market wouldn't work here. No home buyer was going to do one because they'd have no assurance that all of the rest would get done in a consistent fashion.
Because they're row houses, obviously.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're a unified design. These original porches had been lost. They ran across the entire facade. The idea was that we needed to restore the curb appeal to these, to do the exterior, do the envelope, that then would make a private market viable here.
So it was a public-private partnership that you put together with a bunch of different groups and neighborhood groups and that type of a thing. And that's really important, isn't it, to bring that kind of coalition together?
We're part of a coalition of 14 Northside neighborhood organizations. We can get more collectively than we can individually.
Sure. So what did you do to stabilize the properties?
Well, basically we did the envelope. We did the roofs, put all new windows in, did the brickwork, and then to give it curb appeal, we restored the original porches and the sidewalks.
Left the inside to whoever you'd sell them to.
That's right. 1/5 the work, 1/5 the risk, and frankly, the home buyer will invest more than we ever could hope to as a nonprofit developer.
Now, with acquisition and the envelope stabilization, you said about $70,000. Then you were able to sell them for about $40,000 with some of the subsidies and working with the different groups.
It's open. There are no income limitations. They're about 3,000 square feet. We help match them up with the financing, but it's helping the private market, not replacing it.
How many units?
There are a total of 9 in the row. We've done 6.
And you
we
have
have 3 to go.
You have what? But you have one.
Oh, we have 1 left to sell. So
it doesn't get any better than that. Remember this: if you tear down a property, a historic property, it's gone forever. That wonderful resource. Don't do this to yourself. Mothball a property. Find a way to get together with other development groups and stabilize them and find buyers for them, because that's the way it works in your neighborhood and my neighborhood. It's great stuff. You know, I love these bay windows.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, another issue in Central City historic neighborhoods across the country are vacant lots. They're all over the place, and it's what we call gap toothing. Now, well, for instance, take this beautiful old house. Not so beautiful right now, but it was a double house. It could be a great place to live. And the reason that nobody wants to come in and renovate this house is because next to it is a vacant lot. It's unmowed, it's not very pretty. So is there a solution to this problem? Well, you better believe it. Well, here in Pittsburgh, some very interested neighbors living in their neighborhood decided they didn't want burned out hulks and vacant lots, so they started doing what we call infill. And this is Nick Carazzi, and he's a neighbor in what neighborhood?
The Deutschtown Historic District.
Right here in Pittsburgh. And they got together and what? You bought these burned out hulks somehow, got some government grants going, or what? Tell us the process.
Well, we bought them from a bankrupt bank, and we actually served as a developer. And we got together a contractor and some subsidy money, some foundation monies, and we told the architect, which we picked because she was so flexible, and we told her exactly what we wanted, and this is what she came up with.
It's absolutely fabulous. Stone lintels, sandstone lintels and sills, different colors of mortar in the brick. The dormers flow with the rest of the buildings, and you made them row houses because that's what's going on this street, isn't it? Now, the total cost of doing these projects per unit was about what?
I think it cost around $120,000 each to build the houses, and they were sold for average around $80,000.
So with the subsidies and everything, you were able to pull that off?
Yes.
Now, hopefully, the idea is that values will rise because of this type of infill, and you won't have to do subsidies down the road.
That's our goal, yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good goal. Nick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you letting us come and take a look at it. This is really fabulous. You did a great job. Well, it's true. Over time, a lot of misguided and downright stupid things have been done with our historic architecture around the country. But the great thing is that we have people like the folks that live in this house that have taken them back. They're not letting them be torn down. They're creating a sense of neighborhood, neighborhood groups, getting together, because after all, what's it all about? Well, it's all about a sense of neighborhood just like this. It's fabulous. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Until next time, I'm Bob Yap, about your house.
About Your House with Bob Yap was partially underwritten by the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
In past places and future spaces, from main streets to back roads, we're helping Americans bring preservation home. The National Trust for Historic Preservation.